He plays like a sweeping forward ball there to Yang, and it pops up, and we all know what happened next. He raises the leg. He's trying to bring the ball under his control. And the guy sees the ball's in the air and comes running in. Now, who wants to make the case that it was definitely not a red card?
Yeah, I'll do that. I'm quite happy to do that. It's never a red card in the history of football. That he's not even made any contact with the guy's head. There's no intent there. There's no malice. He's not kicked out. He's just basically tried to flick the ball over the guy's head. He took a bad touch, and I think the referee has called it correctly. It was a yellow card for dangerous play, but to go to the monitor for that is just bizarre, but not surprising. There was nothing in the challenge at all, and we've seen very similar challenges to that go unpunished. In fact, we had one last week in the Motherwell game where I think it was Maeda took a kick and round about the face, but the ref, I think the ref issued a yellow card at that time. It was just a foul and nothing else. So there was no malice in it. There was no risk. The guy never got touched and then went down holding his face, which didn't help proceedings. But Beaton on VAR, as Brendan mentioned after the game, just couldn't wait to get involved there. Saw an opportunity to directly influence the course of the game, and took it, and that's just to be expected. Don Robertson as well doesn't come out of this with any credit either, because he could have overruled that. He could have just said, "No, I'm quite happy with my original decision, the yellow," and left it at that. But he bottled it as well. And took the easy way out. So I agree with what Jerry said there. From that point on, it wasn't a game at all, and any sort of game plan we had went out the window. So I think that was probably the most defining point in the game. I think Yang was playing really well up to that point, and it looked as if the Hearts left back Cochrane was going to have a really torrid time of it. He was getting outside him a number of times in the first few minutes of the game, and as soon as he went off, our whole game plan was out the window. So awful decision from both Beaton and Robertson, but not unexpected.
Jerry, do you disagree with anything Stephen just said?
No, nothing. I was looking back at that Motherwell challenge earlier today as well. So no, not a thing. It was, and again, I totally agree with Stephen and Don Robertson. Ultimately has a decision to make there, right? It's Beaton maybe pointing out what he's saying, but it's still Don Robertson's decision. So, it was still inexplicable to me, and it's never a sending off. Yellow card for sure, and Brendan, as Stephen says, summed up probably better than anyone at the end of the game.
Well, inexplicable, and Brendan did say you've got to ask John Beaton what's he saying. Well, let's try and do that. He's saying that the ball comes up, hits Yang in the midriff somewhere, and sort of spoons up in the air. So he's not in control of the ball at that time. And it's also not right in front of him. It's kind of out to his right a wee bit. And the Hearts fella comes in at it with a head. Meanwhile, he's tried to take it down with his foot. But his foot is at head height. Right? And like his studs are presumably exposed. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to get inside of the mind of Beaton if it's not just pure malice. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah,
we can't look back at other events and say, that wasn't given. There's no consistency at all, right? But I don't know about you, but I remember watching Nani in some European game years ago for Man United. And the ball came out and he leapt really high up in the air with one foot, and there was no player anywhere near him. No player. He had no idea there was any player anywhere near him. And he goes to take the ball down from way high up. And from nowhere, an opposing player arrived on the scene with his head at the same time, like blindsided him, came in from his blind spot. And he was sent off in that game because his foot was raised. It was at head height. Studs were showing. You have to protect the player. You mentioned malice and stuff, Stephen. Is that part of the rules even?
Well, I think the rules are endangering an opponent, isn't it? And you know, at no part of that did I think he was endangering the Hearts player. You know, even if he had grazed the guy's face, there was no force and there was no forward motion from his foot. He wasn't kicking out at the guy. It wasn't as if he swung a boot at him. You know, if he'd swung the boot at him, even if it was accidentally, he caught him in the head, then, you know, fair enough. But I've seen a few people today comparing it to a sending off that happened in a game between us and St Mirren earlier on in the season when the guy caught Joe Hart in the head with a high boot. But that was completely different. The guy actually in that case did kick out and there was forward force from the foot and he did connect with Joe Hart's head. And you know, that's a different case completely. But there was nothing in it at all. And, you know, if you've got to ask yourself the question, if the referee had just let that go as a yellow card, would anybody have mentioned it after the game, saying that should have been a red? I don't think they would have. I think they would have said, yeah, fair enough, yellow card, and on we go. And it's just John Beaton's just, you know, saw an opportunity to influence the game to Celtic's detriment. And he's took it. It's as simple as that. And you just answered your own question there, Gab, about what was in his head. It's just pure malice. And Jerry summed it up earlier. A guy that should be nowhere near a Celtic game and nowhere near any game involving Celtic or Rangers because he just can't hide his bias.